Welcome to Building the Future. I'm your host, Kevin Horick. You can check out new episodes of the show every Tuesday and Thursday at 2 p.m. If you missed an episode or want to get more information about the show, please visit buildingthefutureshow.com. Welcome back to the show. Today we have Hayley Simons, co-founder, director at Alberta Creativity Network, formerly Creative Alberta. Hayley, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. You kind of have an interesting background, and I think it's kind of important to kind of talk about exactly what that is. But maybe before we kind of get into what you're doing, let's get to know you a little bit better and start off with where you grew up.
Okay. Well, I am a born, raised Edmonton, Alberta native.
Okay.
I won't tell you when I was born in Edmonton.
That's fine.
But, it was a while ago.
Nothing wrong with that.
I kind of like the monarch butterflies after spending some time, a few years outside Alberta. I, for various reasons, came back to Alberta, like that homing pigeon, and I'm still here.
Sure. So you went away for university. Where did you go and what did you take?
I did. I actually spent my undergraduate years here in Edmonton at the University of Alberta.
Okay.
Wonderful university. Made amazing friends, lifelong connections and friends. I mean, it's such a lightweight term for it. After I'd finished my undergrad degree, I found a wonderful teacher / mentor.
Okay.
I'm a pianist, and my degree was in piano performance.
Okay.
So rather than finding, how lots of university students like to go research the schools and where they want to get their degree from, I stalked a particular teacher, and his name is John Perry. And John Perry was teaching at Rice University in Houston, Texas.
Okay. So,
well, I had...
No, keep going, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Houston was, it may as well have been the moon for somebody who had been raised in Edmonton. And people told me, no, you'll find lots of similarities between Alberta and Texas. And, well, they were right.
So before we kind of get into your time in Texas, what got you playing the piano?
I wish my memory went back that far. My sisters played the piano. We had a piano in the house. My grandfather was a trombonist in the Army back in very early 1900s. We have pictures of him in the band with the trombone.
That's cool.
And it was really cool. I just grew up around the piano and gravitated toward that. So I had known nothing else. There was nothing else in my existence, and that was the focal point for the first couple decades of my life.
Sure. So how did you hear about John Perry, and what kind of attracted you to wanting to kind of study with him?
Well, I think, ultimately classical piano or classical music for that matter is a very small community. Everybody knows everybody else. My teacher at the University of Alberta, Ernesto Lejano, marvelous teacher and musician, went to school with John, as did many contemporaries who are still in the classical music circle today. And he said, you simply must go and audition for him. I did, met him in Texas. Actually, I met him in Banff, and he said, come to Texas. And I said, okay, because I would have followed him anywhere. And did spend a number of wonderful years there, and then came back to Alberta after I had graduated, and had various life events happen, and began my PhD here back at the University of Alberta with Mark Jablonski, with the late Mark Jablonski. So I've been very fortunate to have people who I consider musical and artistic gods in my life. And I don't say that term lightly. I'm not being flip about that. These were people who not only touched me and my artistry, but left a legacy. Well, John Perry is still with us, thankfully, but Marek and Ernesto left an imprint on me that I will have forever, and hopefully I can pass on to other people as well. The passion, the artistry, the mastery. There are few people who have walked the earth as brilliant and talented, as wonderful as them. So I'm very, very fortunate.
No, that's great. I think like a lot of people kind of, even if they don't play music, listen to music on kind of a daily or weekly basis. And you just see like with streaming services and stuff online, like I was reading a stat today, I think like Spotify alone has over 50 million subscribers, right? I think just in kind of, you know, the countries that they're in. And that to me was like huge because they're just one of a few, right? So if you take that, like it's kind of fascinating to me. So what's your involvement with Alberta Creativity Network, and what exactly is it?
Okay, that's a big leap. So I'll backtrack a little bit.
Okay.
As a classical musician, one can tend to be rather isolated.
Okay.
And I'm not an isolated person. I liked being social, and I think the thing that cranked my engine the most was the interaction with people. So the plight of the solo, struggling, tormented artist was not an avenue I felt inclined to pursue, and I had stopped performing as a soloist. I still perform occasionally as a collaborative artist. We even went on to have a new music ensemble called the Hammerhead Consort, which specialized in performing solely new music, as in fresh music, fresh off the press by living, breathing composers. And that was a really exciting and different turn as well, because you get to see the creation aspect in process. You don't just get to be a translator of ghosts from the past. And that was a really exciting process as well. But the other avenue I had taken was teaching. And that was really interesting because, of course, when you're teaching in a music studio or a private music studio, not just a classroom situation, you get to know a person. And it becomes no longer just about teaching an instrument or teaching a subject. You're actually teaching and guiding a person. And at that point, I realized that there were some young people and not so young people, because I taught adult students as well, who were hungry, starving for some kind of artistic fulfillment in their lives. And what that meant is they weren't getting that kind of fulfillment elsewhere, whether it was in school, whether grade school, university, their work process. It led me to investigate, why these kids and adults who were sitting on my piano bench weekly were lamenting the lack of opportunities there was in their life for some kind of creative output. We talked about earlier, we called it an outlet, or some kind of meaning on a regular basis. And for other more physiological or scientific reasons, I like to think that the scientific study behind pursuing art and music led to some pretty significant successes in my family's lives as well. So do you want to hear about that? Do you want me to elaborate on that
Just keep
more?
Going. Sure.
It's rather personal.
Well, it's up to you.
I don't mean to share on that level. There was a certain point in my life as a mother of a youngster when we had received a diagnosis for my youngest child of autism. Okay. At about the same time, we received the diagnosis of Alzheimer's from my mother. So I had on both ends of the spectrum something that was clearly not quite right and largely inexplicable. There was no explanation for either of those. What I did know is that in both those cases, art and music especially were the triggers that did something. There was response. They both grew, and largely, well, in of course, in my mother's case, she did pass away eventually, but the music was the one joy in her life, in her last days. As far as my daughters are concerned, that music really led to what is a blossoming career and a hugely successful scholastic career. And we knew there was something there. We knew it wasn't just a one-off, that music or the arts wasn't significant. And so you couple that with what I had been seeing every day on my piano bench, and these people wanting more. They just wanted more out of life. And I knew that it wasn't music per se. There was something deeper. There was something about the music, and that led to the concept of creativity. When you boil it down, it really is just an expression. Whether they wanted to come to the kitchen table and write poetry, or compose music, perform music, there was that hunger.
Sure.
So it was. I discovered it wasn't a one-off. It wasn't certainly an isolated situation with just my family. There are many, 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 many people out there, and a series of events. One thing led to another. There was a wonderful event held in Alberta through the Alberta government and the education department, and one of the ministers, Minister Dave Hancock, led an event called Inspiring Education, which was really a meaningful event in that it led to actually many questions. And as so often happens when there is an event, it is just a singular event, and there is no concerted or strategic afterthought what is going to happen after this event. And I was left wanting more, and we had wonderful speakers, and Dan Pink was one of them, and he and I maintained communication. His work was at the time absolutely breakthrough as far as right brain versus left brain. It was all very interesting, and of course this is 7-8 years ago now, so that led to, hey, why don't we form a club, and we'll call it CreativeAlberta.
Okay,
We'll make our goal to be championing creativity throughout the province. And as so often happens, and it's still astounding to me how often this happens. I wasn't the only one with this idea. Certainly, I wasn't the only one with this idea in North America or in the world. And we very soon found other organizations that had already been in existence or were just forming at that time. And one of the lead organizations was Creative Oklahoma.
Okay, interesting.
And and they were, as it happens, just forming slightly sooner than CreativeAlberta was. We met each other as lead organization people, and others as well, at an event in Washington, D.C. called AEP the Arts Education Partnership. And I invited a few education folk from Edmonton to accompany me down there. And we had a wonderful time, and we were officially and very casually inducted as the only Canadian members of the Arts Education Partnership. And I was very pleased and thrilled with that, and
That's cool.
Thrilled to take that experience back to Alberta. So, when you are passionate about something and you have an idea, I think the most powerful thing to find out is that you're not alone, and you connect with other people automatically. So CreativeAlberta was formed. We had the connections with these same people from the Arts Education Partnership, Creative Oklahoma, other networks, other people who we had met through various conferences, usually, again, parallel to a classical music community, this creative community was very small. Everybody seemed to know each other, and the network just grew. At that time, Creative Oklahoma was having, and still does have, its yearly creative events and conferences attended worldwide by many, many people. And we wanted to do something like that here in Alberta. So why can't we do that here? And we did. And we made that our goal for 2012. We wanted to hold an imagination conversation in Alberta. And the imagination conversations were based upon a precedent, a template called, of course, Imagination Conversations that were held in the United States. And we had attended our first one under the as invitees of the head of the Lincoln Center Institute for Education. And this imagination conversation for them was the culmination of a number of other imagination conversations. And of course, it's all based on, yeah, you guessed it, imagination and highlighting the importance of imagination and creativity in the development of innovation. So from these events, what eventually happened is the formation of an international network called the National Creativity Network. And the National Creativity Network is still in existence. We still champion not just the arts, of course, we champion creativity, innovation, and imagination as it evolves through different sectors, in the sectors of education, commerce, and culture. And so, of course, as the network expands, the conversation is expanding as well. And it has no longer just become resting on the one pillar of arts or arts education. It's really grown quite exponentially, and there now is no limit. We changed the name Creative Alberta to the Alberta Creativity Network to parallel what the National Creativity Network is doing, and keeping in our minds that it really is a network, and that's what we are here to do, network and point people not only to the importance of creativity and imagination in the development of innovation and other development of other sectors,
Sure.
education, but to keep the conversation going and broadening it beyond our own geographical borders. That was really long-winded, Kevin.
No, it's good. It's good. So I'm curious though, like you guys are having these conversations and you're growing this global network, but how are you guys promoting kind of being creative and getting the arts into kind of, the education sector, and maybe getting governments to think about this, or people that maybe aren't creative or consider themselves not creative? Because I think everybody's creative, at least in my opinion. But like, how do you kind of promote the importance of creativity? Because I think pretty much without creativity, we wouldn't have pretty much anything that we use on a daily basis. And I think people don't even realize it's like that simple.
It's astounding to me. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It's astounding to me that they can't recognize that it's that simple. And I think part of the challenge is to begin to expand the conversation and the advocacy. It isn't just arts advocacy. It is creativity advocacy. When you elevate the conversation so there are fewer borders and fewer boundaries to try and peg people into certain silos, the conversations then become enormous and really, really valuable. So when you realize that the radio that everybody is listening to right now is a creative invention, it was invented by not just a scientist. These are creative, innovative thinkers. And when you think of what it takes to create that, what it takes to create the technology that you're using right now, everybody knows the story of Steve Jobs and well, maybe they don't, and being kicked out of school, but the only class he really loved was the calligraphy class, and the entire Apple empire was built on the desire to design different fonts. So design is absolutely at the core of our existence. And when we think of art, it's really easy for us to slip back into what we've all grown up with, and that is the segmenting, siloing construct, and really an artificial construct, and pretty recent artificial construct too, of here's my music class, here's my math class, here's my science class. And those kinds of divisions are artificial, and there is no reason why they need to exist anymore.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you because you're right. Like the iPhone, which most people have a smartphone at this point, like wouldn't be invented without creativity. And like a lot of people, to go back to your kind of Steve Jobs reference, like, they did other arts. Like he liked calligraphy. Some people listen to music, the clothes we wear is creative. Like I think people don't realize how like they almost feed each other, and then we feed other people, like create people that have or make a living in the creative space, feed the people that necessarily maybe don't make a living in the creative space. But I think everybody kind of feeds creativity. And even if you come up with like a good idea at work where it's maybe you're not really in necessarily something that's traditionally a creative type field, but if you think of a way to like save time doing a task, well, that's creativity, right? So I think it's not always just about like painting a picture. It's about, kind of even solving problems, at least in my opinion, because the smartphone, for example, is, revolutionary and super creative, and it solves a real problem, right? So you kind of, to your point, like you bring, if you take down the barriers between kind of math and science and creativity and a bunch of other things, it's just about, kind of getting people to think and come up with new things and hopefully make our existence on this planet better. That's how I see it. Do you kind of agree with that, or what's your
I
take on that?
love the way you put that. I absolutely adore the way you put that. And I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head, Kevin, because creativity is a way of thinking. It's not the outcome. It's not the painting hanging on the wall. It's not the concert that you're attending. It is a way of thinking, and it is a way of building. And like you said, this is for the betterment of our existence. Everything is building, building, building. And we have a choice. We can foster that way of thinking because it is something that is developed and practiced over time, as we can see with the artist. That is an artist's way of thinking. We've had practice at that. Other people have not, because they've only been exposed to this rather stilted construct of scheduled classes and different subjects, which is still bizarre. But you're exactly right. When we open that and when we start to collaborate and blur the boundaries and, for example, teach through the arts, we will be able to build our creative capacity and that way we need to think and that way we need to live to ensure we have a better life.
Sure. No, I 100% agree with you. And I think even just having like a creative outlet, I think even if you're not, even if you're like, I don't like painting or whatever, there's like other things you can do creatively to just kind of have an outlet that even if you never show anybody or even tell other people that you do that. But like for me, like I'm not really I wouldn't consider myself like a painter, but I've painted in the past, and the stuff I come up with I think is terrible and I would never show anybody, but I find it like super relaxing, just like put on music and just like paint. It doesn't really matter what comes out, right? If you feel better after it, like why is that bad, right? And I think some people are just scared to kind of do something, even if it's kind of just for themselves or to kind of just relax, And it kind of sounds maybe cheesy, but I think sometimes people are scared to just try new things to kind of help themselves along and maybe just kind of have a relaxing night.
Sure, absolutely. And lest we allocate it to a frivolous thing like having a relaxing night, because I can hear people thinking, yeah, sure. And there isn't a mother out there who isn't thinking, yeah, easy for you to say I'm going to have a relaxing night here and grab my paints and my my canvas and try and create something, because it ain't going to happen, I guarantee. But it is something that we can encourage and that we can foster, especially in an education system.
Sure.
Where we have people at that perfect age for it to seem normal and not freakish if after the age of 11 or grade 5 somebody raises their hands and says, yeah, you know what, I was thinking of being an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And people aren't looking at them saying, oh, good luck there, buddy, because all that food bank is going to have to feed you. So we have a very skewed sense of purpose and priority, I see. I would hope that kind of practice and something that we can encourage like that really leads to let's use the heavy hitting argument, innovation.
Mm-hmm.
So if there are groups of kids or classrooms or schools or entire districts, which there are, by the way, devoted completely to teaching through creativity and exploration and imagination and fostering those kinds of things. Well, these are the kids who are creating the apps that we're using on our phones right now. These are the kids who are creating computers, entire businesses. Entrepreneurs are creative. If we start bringing in that economic argument, then we give some weight, which I admittedly don't feel 100% comfortable, because there are certain aesthetics that you just can't count. And how does it feel to listen to that piece of music? Well, that's something that you can't tabulate on a computer.
Sure.
Or on a calculator, but it does have some intrinsic value. But once you start to eliminate all of those things, then I think we see the real value. But if we go back to what we were saying before, and that it's a way of thinking, I'm going to go a little bit deeper. This might sound a little bit esoteric, but when we connect with that part of ourselves, the part of ourselves that doesn't just have to do something, the part of ourselves that isn't consuming something, because we, goodness knows, spend enough of our lives consuming. The opposite of consumption is creation. When we turn off the consumption and we start creating something, all of a sudden we've triggered something. We've triggered an awareness, something that is perhaps more intimate and smaller within ourselves, but also larger and externally. And what that ultimately will trigger is an act of connection. When you create something, you are connecting to something, whether it's yourself, whether it's an artist wanting to connect with an audience, whether it's a business person wanting to connect with clients or customers. There is that connection. And ultimately, it's that human connection that we're fostering. And we can build anything upon that. And I think that's where we might need to be turning our priorities right now.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. So what do you kind of say to the people that are kind of skeptical of the arts? Like, how do you kind of at least get them to at least maybe think about kind of the art side of things and trying to maybe bring and foster kind of the creativity into their organizations?
Oh, gosh. Okay. I have a lot to say about people who are skeptical of the arts. And I love that. Actually, I thrive on listening to them, because I really need to listen to them. What are you afraid of? What is there to be skeptical of the arts for? What's the bottom line? And inevitably, the bottom line comes to some kind of skewed financial rationale. And what that can mean is we don't have enough money to fund both the arts program and the science program at school. I'm sorry, guess which one is going to go? And I steadfastly argue, why is there still a science and an arts program? It doesn't make any sense. It's like I'm going to fill the right 2 tires on my car, and I'm sorry, I don't have enough air for the left 2 tires. It doesn't make any sense at all. There are different skill sets, there are different knowledge bases, but until we learn and accept and realize that they all work best together, this lowering of the value of the arts, it's so easily extrapolated and severed from the rest of the body. I think it's actually that violent. How can you think of that as just a frivolous thing that you can just divide and prioritize everything else over that? So the skepticism of the arts. Here's another argument I hear all the time. Well, how are you going to make a living as an artist? Well, okay, I don't make a living as an artist. I can tell you firsthand it's exceptionally difficult to make a living as an artist, but that's not the goal. If that's your goal, boy, we would have a whole lot of I mean no offense by this, accountants and pharmacists. I mean, and I only mean that because that tends to be a profession that every parent would feel very safe and secure if their child were to take up.
Sure. No, that's fair.
Which is great.
Yeah, no, fair enough. But like, I guess like for me, like I do make a living in the arts, right? Like that's my day job. Like this radio thing is totally a side project. And so for me, like I basically work, on web and mobile software all day long, right? So I think people, when you say art, it's like, well, like a painter or like a poet or like a musician, and there's nothing wrong with that because like I play drums and guitar and stuff as well, but so like I love kind of all aspects of that stuff. But I think people don't realize that like there's other industries that you can go into in the arts that you can make a good, if not really good living. And if you even want to argue that one further, there's like, I was reading an article a few weeks ago that you have way more of a chance at becoming a millionaire going to work at a startup as like a designer or a developer than you ever would trying to be like a pro athlete. And I was like, it's true, right? And so many parents push their kids into sports, but in reality, if they're really looking to maybe potentially do something that they could live and do for the rest of their life, because we all know pro athletes can only do it for, periods of time or maybe decades, but you could be a programmer or a designer for your entire life, right? And you can make a really good living at it. And I think just kind of promoting that and mentioning that, I think just kind of getting the awareness out there, it's like, to me, that's still the arts, right? And writing code is an art form, and it takes a lot of creativity. Or doing design for the phone that we all carry every day is, it's the arts, right? So I think it's not always just kind of what we traditionally think of as the arts.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Again, you said that so well. And there's a person, Jacob Bronowski, who wrote The Ascent of Man, and he said about science and art, science is as much a matter of imagination as is poetry, and again, it goes to that really antiquated sense that the arts are separate and beyond anything else. And you're right. When we start measuring the economic contribution of the arts or creativity or creative industries, and we have done that through the National Creativity Network and the subcommittee on the Creative Economy Coalition. They've done a fabulous work. It's dated now because it's 2 years old,
Sure.
Where they made a listing of definitions of what really defined what were the creative industries, after you do that and you start to tabulate the contribution, the economic contribution of the creative industries, and in most cases, in Canada we haven't done that specific math, but there have been initial tabulations saying that, for example, in British Columbia, the creative industries outnumber the total contributions monetarily of fisheries, of mining, of forestries, and there are a couple other ones combined.
Sure,
all of those industries combined. Yet we still, and the adage goes, what we measure, we support. And if we don't measure them as creative industries, because that's a little odious maybe to the rarefied artist, and we don't like to think of ourselves as being part of an industry, yet we are, and it's a completely fair evaluation too. We contribute enormously in this continent, on this continent, to our economic well-being. So once we have that economic validation, I wonder if the people who are skeptical of, quote, the arts would be so quick to jump in. And at that point, I would say, okay, well, what is more economically viable than the arts? We don't have a whole lot. Of course, in Alberta, the argument against the arts and for that other side of the conversation is, well, we have our oil industry.
Yeah.
Totally. So
we're also in a recession right now because of that industry. So
well, exactly, a recession that nobody thought would happen, especially this quickly. And 7 years ago, nobody did think this would happen. And the arrogance, I'll be honest, the arrogance was astounding. We don't need to, was the general tenor, we don't need to think about the contribution of the arts because we have the contribution of the oil industry. And when you're relying on that singular, all bets on that one horse, something's going to happen. And it's almost like it was begging to happen. And of course it did, because we weren't the first region to see it. I mean, we had our neighbors to the south experiencing this years before. And then what? And then what happens when the bottom drops out? Whether it's the oil industry in Alberta or some other industry in Finland, or you have to be resilient, and you have to be able to redefine. And it makes you really think about what you want to prioritize in your life, in your family, in your community, and what is important to you. And at that point, it's not, well, the arts are frivolous. Mm-hmm. Again, it's not something to be severed. It's creativity, imagination. These are qualities. It's not a result. And the arts aren't frivolous. It's an aesthetic. It's an aesthetic that few in this country or throughout North America can do without. But I think really the most compelling reasons for not dismissing the arts unilaterally like that is because of the relationship building qualities it has. Teaching things through the arts in an artistic way, and still I am a little hesitant to use that term because I know it does alienate some people. It does create better citizenry. It creates an air of empathy. We get to foster relationships. We get to work on the things that really matter. And through that, we actually have a desire to create devices or apps or businesses for the betterment of humankind.
Sure. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. So what would you say is kind of the Creativity Network's main goal of maybe 2017 and kind of beyond? Like, is there something that you guys are really trying to focus on? Like, are you trying to get more arts in schools or more arts in kind of the company or companies, or kind of both? Or what is kind of like, do you guys set out kind of like a yearly goal?
Oh, that's a great question. To be frank, the network right now, and as with the National Creativity Network, exists as volunteer directors who are doing fabulous things in their own regions and own areas, and usually it is project-based or event-based initiatives, and with the overarching goal to promote and escalate the importance of creativity and imagination throughout the sectors of commerce, culture, and education. And it's a tricky plate spinning kind of juggling act, and really elevating all conversations, any conversation including science, the famous STEM initiative. Why not expand that to include arts and make it the STEAM? That's the little popular kitschy acronym for things. But really, we do want to expand the conversation. We want people to realize that the innovation that people long for and tout as the sexy result that everybody wants is the cure-all, the hero that's going to come in and make everyone's economy and lives better. It has an origin, and the origin isn't stilted subjects divided in school. The answer is engaging the curiosity and the creativity of kids, so they're involved and they're invested in what's happening in their lives, and that they're actually becoming agents and active, effective agents, and that they have a voice. And one of the projects, maybe this is a good time to introduce this project.
Sure.
The Alberta Creativity Network is partnering with the Alberta Council of Technologies and the Centre for Global Education. And we're really excited to be announcing our launch. Actually, just 2 days ago, we had our launch of what we're calling Creating the Next Alberta, Creating the New Alberta. I'm going to get this wrong. It's all good. Creating the New Alberta, and it's engaging youth. We've engaged high school students across the province in a really broad array of schools and school settings, and we have a very large province, so it was no small feat. Terry Godwalt is the lead. We're thrilled and honored to have him taking this as a project where we will ultimately be engaging 6,000 youth to lend their voice and lend their creativity and their imagination and their thoughts in creating the new Alberta. Now, during our launch, I was really struck by one young lady's question, and it may not surprise you that this question came from a young lady who attends Victoria School of the Arts.
Sure, that's where I went. Yep.
Oh, good. Well, that's where my daughter is now. So I was advocating, of course, for there to be that arts voice in this project because it's so important. But she very eloquently and diplomatically brought up that this is an endeavor largely launched by the Alberta Council of Technologies. She said, where do we fit in? We are artists. We want to be a part of this discussion, but how are we going to fit in? And Terry replied, of course, that that's why the art school was chosen to be one of the participants. We also have a science-focused school. We have schools representing all kinds of communities throughout our province because it's the diversity of the voices that matters the most. And for those artists, what I heard in her question was that, again, she fears being segmented or severed from the real conversation. And what we're trying to encourage is as an artist or as a scientist, you are the conversation. You are part of the conversation. You are an equal part of the conversation, a valid, affirmed, and validated part of the conversation. We can't do without that part of the conversation. If we start doing that, then it is no longer a full conversation. We can't design our future. So that question just 2 days ago kept me going again. And how can we honor her question? How can we honor her fear? And this is the fear that the artists have. And it's kind of a reflection of the naysayers, those who don't appreciate or fully recognize the value of the arts or artistic thinking or creative thinking. So what I would say to that on both sides, because we do have fears on both sides, we have the artists hammering at the window to get into the conversation, and everybody afraid that their children are going to go off and be starving artists and ballerinas on the street somewhere in the freezing winters of Edmonton. But what I would say is that when we include everybody in the conversation and make sure that all voices matter and all voices are heard and all voices have an opportunity to collaborate together, then all of a sudden we get to experience the greatest common denominator. And they learn to look above economic or artistic or scientific considerations. They become people collaborating in a very creative way through very creative means. And I'm really excited to see what they come up with as their output in the final white paper at the end of April, which is just a few short weeks away.
Sure. Well, Haley, sadly, we're running out of time, so maybe let's close the show with mentioning where people can get more information about yourself and the network.
Okay, sure. We would encourage everybody there are a few sites with a lot of acronyms. The Alberta Council of Technologies, ABC Tech, is the lead organization of the Engaging Youth Project. The Center for Global Education is another. Alberta Council, said that one already. The Alberta Creativity Network is a partner and subsidiary and member of the National Creativity Network, which is a broader organization run throughout North America, which is broadening every week. I would invite everybody to investigate, especially if everyone in Virginia and Atlanta. Yeah. Atlanta, that's Georgia, yeah, are listening. The National Creativity Network and the subsidiary or the subcommittee, the Creative Economy Coalition, those are all wonderful organizations. Just do a little bit of searching. I can't even do justice in this short call to all of the fabulous activities. Please get involved. Please investigate. Do something. Have a click.
Well, Haley, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to be on the show, and I look forward to keeping in touch with you, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. The music for the show is done by Electric Mantra. You can check them out at electricmantra.com and keep them for the future.